and the rule of law, we should never forget that for many in the world, the closest relative of poverty is injustice. Development has never been just about aid or money, but I am proud that Britain is a country that keeps its promises to the poorest in our world. Mr. President, a year ago I stood here and argued that the Arab Spring represented an unprecedented opportunity to advance peace, prosperity and security. 1 year on, some believe that the Arab Spring is in danger of becoming an Arab winter. They point to the riots on the streets, to Syria's descent into a bloody civil war, the frustration at the lack of economic progress, and the emergence of newly elected Islamist-led governments across the region. But I believe these people are in danger of drawing the wrong conclusion. Today is not the time to turn back, but to keep the faith and redouble our support for open societies and for people's demands for a job and a voice. Yes, the path is challenging, but democracy is not and never has been about simply holding an election. It is not one person, one vote, once. Democracy is about establishing the building blocks of true democracy, the independence of the judiciary and the rule of law, with the majority prepared to defend the rights of the minority, the freedom of the media, a proper place for the army in society, and the development of effective state institutions, political parties, and wider civil society. Now, I'm not naive in believing that democracy alone has some magical healing power. I'm a liberal conservative, not a neoconservative. I respect the different histories and traditions that each country has. I welcome steps taken in countries where reform is happening with the consent of the people. I know that every country takes its own path and that progress will sometimes be slow. Some countries have achieved stability and success based on tradition and consent. Others have endured decades in which the institutions of civil society were deliberately destroyed, political parties banned, free media abolished, the rule of law twisted for the benefit of the few. And we cannot expect the damage of decades to be put right in a matter of months. But the drive for opportunity, for justice, for the rule of law, and the hunger for a job and a voice are not responsible for the problems in the region. In fact, quite the opposite. The building blocks of democracy, fair economies and open societies are part of the solution, not part of the problem. And we in the United Nations must step up our efforts to support the people of these countries as they build their own democratic future. Let me take the arguments in turn. First of all, there are those who say there's been too little progress, that the Arab Spring has produced few tangible improvements in people's lives. This isn't right. Look at Libya since the fall of Gaddafi. We've seen elections to create a new Congress, and now plans to integrate armed groups into the national police and army. None of this is to ignore the huge and sobering challenges that remain. The murder of Ambassador Chris Stevens was a despicable act of terrorism. But the right response is to finish the work that Chris Stevens gave his life to. And that is what the vast majority of Libyans want too. We saw that so inspiringly in Benghazi last weekend, as they took to the streets in their thousands, refusing to allow extremists to hijack their chance for democracy. The Arab Spring has also brought progress in Egypt, where the democratically elected president has asserted civilian control over the military, in Yemen and Tunisia, where elections have brought new governments to power, and in Morocco, where there's a new constitution and a prime minister appointed on the basis of a popular vote for the first time. And even further afield, Somalia has also taken the first vital step forward by electing a new president. So there has been progress, and none of it would have come about without people standing up last year and demanding change, or without this United Nations having the courage to respond to those cries. Now, second, there is the argument that the removal of dictators has somehow started to unleash a new wave of violence, extremism, and instability. Some argue that in a volatile region, only an authoritarian strongman can maintain stability and security. Or even some argue that recent events prove that democracy in the Middle East brings terrorism, not security, and sectarian conflict, not peace. Again, I believe we should reject this argument. I have no illusions about the danger that political transition can be exploited by violent extremists. I understand the importance of protecting people and defending national security, and Britain is determined to work with our allies to do this. But democracy and open societies are not the problem. The fact is that for decades, too many were prepared to tolerate dictators like Gaddafi and Assad on the basis that they would keep their people safe at home and promote stability in the region and the wider world. But in fact, neither of these things was true. Not only were these dictators repressing their people, ruling by control, not by consent, plundering the national wealth and denying people their basic rights and freedoms, they were funding terrorism overseas as well. Brutal dictatorships made the region more dangerous, not less. More dangerous because these regimes dealt with frustration at home by whipping up anger against their neighbors, against the West, against Israel. And more dangerous too, because people denied a job and a voice were given no alternative but a dead-end choice between dictatorship or extremism. What was heartening about the events of Tahrir Square was that the Egyptian people found their voice and rejected this false choice. They withheld their consent from a government that had lost all legitimacy, and they chose instead the road to a more open and fair society. This road is not easy, but it is the right one, and I believe it will make countries safer in the end. Now next, there are those who say that whatever may have been achieved elsewhere, in Syria, the Arab Spring has unleashed a vortex of sectarian violence and hatred with the potential to destroy the region. Now, Syria does present some profound challenges, but those who look at Syria today and blame the Arab Spring have got it the wrong way round. You cannot blame the people for the behavior of a brutal dictator. The responsibility lies with the brutal dictator himself. Assad is today inflaming Syria's sectarian tensions, just as his father did as far back as the slaughter in Hama 30 years ago. And not only in Syria, Assad has colluded with those in Iran who are set on dragging the region to a wider conflict. The only way out of Syria's nightmare is to move forward towards political transition and not to give up the cause of freedom. The future for Syria is a future without Assad. It has to be based on mutual consent, as was clearly agreed in Geneva in June. But if anyone was in any doubt about the horrors that Assad has inflicted on his people,